What if I told you that an ancient text exists, one that records the names of kings who ruled not for decades, not even for centuries, but for tens of thousands of years? A list that speaks of an age before a great flood, where rulers reigned for impossibly long periods before a cataclysm reshaped the world. This is the Sumerian King List, a document that challenges our understanding of history. It blends real rulers with mythical figures, presents lifespans that defy logic, and describes a flood that parallels stories found in cultures around the world. And is it just legend, or does it hold clues to a lost civilization? Today we're answering all your biggest questions about this mysterious text, what it says, how it was discovered, and what it might mean for our understanding of history. Welcome to this deep dive into the Sumerian King List. And before we begin, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more in-depth explorations into ancient mysteries. The Sumerian King List is an ancient Mesopotamian text that records the succession of kingship across various Sumerian city-states, from what was believed to be the beginning of civilization to later historical rulers. Written in Sumerian cuneiform, the earliest known versions of the text date back to approximately 2000 BCE, though the information it contains refers to rulers and dynasties that go as far back as 2900 BCE or earlier. The King List provides a chronological record of rulers from different cities, suggesting that power transferred from one city to another over time. However, what makes this document particularly unique is that it blends mythology with history, listing kings who ruled for impossibly long periods, tens of thousands of years before a great flood, followed by rulers with more realistic reigns after this catastrophic event. The text is structured as a political and historical document, serving as both a record of rulers and a possible means of legitimizing certain dynasties by connecting them to divine authority. The King List was widely known and copied across Mesopotamian civilizations, with different versions appearing on sites such as Nippur, Larsa, Ur, and Kish, showing its importance in shaping the historical and political narratives of the time. While parts of the document have been historically verified through archaeological evidence, much of it remains shrouded in mystery, leaving scholars to debate its origins, purpose, and accuracy. The Sumerian King List is a structured record of rulers from ancient Mesopotamia, presenting a chronological account of kingship across various city-states. Compiled around 2000 BCE, the text is remarkable for blending mythological elements with historical data, making it one of the most intriguing historical documents from the ancient world. One of its defining features is its division into two major periods: pre-Diluvian, before the flood, and post-Diluvian, after the flood. According to the list, before a massive flood reshaped civilization, kings ruled for extraordinarily long periods, with reigns extending tens of thousands of years. For example, Alulim of Eridu allegedly ruled for 28,800 years, while Enigma of Bad Tibera ruled for 43,200 years. However, after the flood, reign lengths became significantly shorter, aligning more closely with human lifespans, as seen with later rulers such as Enmebaragesi of Kish, circa 2600 BCE, whose existence has been confirmed by inscriptions. Another key characteristic of the King List is its assertion that kingship was divinely bestowed. The text repeatedly states that kingship was lowered from heaven, indicating that rulers were seen as chosen by the gods. The King List also reflects the political landscape of Sumer, as it attempts to legitimize dynastic rule by presenting an unbroken succession of rulers, despite the historical reality that many city-states were rivals and often at war. Furthermore, some sections of the text appear to have been altered over time, likely to justify the dominance of certain ruling houses. Lastly, the King List is written in Sumerian cuneiform, and different versions have been found across Mesopotamian sites, indicating its widespread cultural significance. While it contains both verifiable history and mythology, the document serves as an invaluable source for understanding how early civilizations recorded and justified their past. The most complete version of the Sumerian King List was discovered in the 1920s by British archaeologist Herbert Weld Blundell during excavations in Kish, an ancient Sumerian city in modern-day Iraq. This version, known as the Weld Blundell Prism, is a four-sided clay cuneiform tablet dating back to around 2000 BCE. It is currently housed in the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, England. However, the Weld Blundell Prism is not the only surviving copy. Fragments of the Sumerian King List have also been found at multiple Mesopotamian sites, including Nippur, Larsa, Ur, and Lagash, with inscriptions varying slightly between versions. Some of the earliest copies of the text date back to the Ur III period, circa 2100 to 2000 BCE, but scholars believe that the content of the King List was compiled from even older sources that may have existed in oral tradition before being recorded in cuneiform. These discoveries suggest that the King List was a widely known and influential document in ancient Mesopotamia, possibly used for political and historical purposes by different ruling dynasties over time. The multiple versions of the King List found across various locations indicate that it was a dynamic text that evolved with each new ruling power, reinforcing their legitimacy by linking them to an ancient and divine lineage of kingship. The Sumerian King List is significant because it provides one of the earliest recorded attempts to document and legitimize political authority, making it an invaluable artifact for understanding how early civilizations viewed history, kingship, and divine power. Dating back to approximately 2000 BCE, but referencing much earlier rulers as far back as 2900 BCE, or earlier King List serves as both a historical record and a mythological text that influenced later cultures. It offers a structured chronology of Sumerian rulers, presenting kingship as something that was divinely bestowed upon city-states in succession. The King List helps historians reconstruct the shifting centers of power in ancient Mesopotamia, from Eridu to Kish, Uruk, Ur, and beyond, showcasing how leadership changed over time. Many scholars believe the list was not just a neutral historical record, but a political tool used to legitimize the rule of certain dynasties. By linking current rulers to legendary figures and divine kingship, later Sumerian kings reinforced their right to rule. The text also omits some rulers and city-states, suggesting it was edited over time to favor particular political agendas. The King List establishes a pre-flood and post-flood distinction, a concept that appears in later religious traditions, including the Epic of Gilgamesh, written around 2100 to 2000 BCE, and the Biblical Book of Genesis, written between 1500 and 500 BCE. The idea of a great flood resetting civilization is a recurring theme in world mythology, and the King List is one of the earliest references to it. The structure of the Sumerian King List influenced later Babylonian and Assyrian king lists, setting a precedent for how ancient civilizations recorded their rulers. Some scholars argue that its format even influenced later biblical genealogies, such as the long lifespans of early patriarchs in the Old Testament. Despite its mix of myth and historical fact, the Sumerian King List provides valuable insights into the political and religious landscape of early Mesopotamian society. It reflects how the Sumerians understood kingship as both a political institution and a sacred duty, and how they sought to preserve their history in written form. Ultimately, the Sumerian King List is one of the most important ancient texts ever discovered, offering a rare glimpse into how the first known civilization recorded its past, legitimized its rulers, and shaped future historical traditions. One of the most puzzling aspects of the Sumerian King List is the impossibly long lifespans attributed to the pre-Diluvian or pre-flood kings, some of whom were said to have ruled for tens of thousands of years. Historians and scholars have proposed several theories to explain these extraordinary numbers, ranging from symbolic interpretations to dynastic calculations. The list records kings such as Alulim of Eridu, who allegedly ruled for 28,800 years, and Enmenluana of Bad Tibira, with a reign lasting 43,200 years. After the Great Flood, reign lengths drastically shorten, with rulers like Enmebaragesi of Kish, around 2600 BCE, governing for more reasonable spans of time, aligning with historically verified rulers. Historians and scholars have put forward several interpretations to explain these exaggerated reigns. Some researchers suggest that the figures represent astronomical cycles or numerical systems used by ancient Sumerians rather than literal lifespans. The numbers could be linked to lunar or solar cycles, which were an integral part of Mesopotamian timekeeping. Some reign lengths, when divided by specific factors, produce meaningful calendar cycles. Another theory suggests that these figures do not represent the lifespan of a single king, but rather entire dynasties or ruling families grouped under one legendary name. If viewed this way, a king may have been a title passed down across generations, rather than a single individual ruling for thousands of years. The extreme ages may have served political and theological purposes by connecting early kings to divine or mythical origins. Later rulers could establish their legitimacy. The phrase kingship was lowered from heaven, which appears in the text, suggests that Sumerian kings were seen as chosen by the gods, making it important for them to trace their lineage back to these long-lived, almost godlike predecessors. The Sumerian King List was likely based on oral traditions that predate written records, meaning stories about rulers could have been embellished over time. This mirrors traditions found in other ancient cultures, such as the biblical patriarchs in Genesis, who also had long lifespans before gradually decreasing in later generations. In the ancient world, it was not uncommon for rulers to exaggerate their reign lengths to demonstrate power and divine favor. Similar traditions can be found in Egyptian, Indian, and Chinese royal records, where some kings were attributed with superhuman qualities. While scholars do not take the lifespans of the early Sumerian kings literally, they agree that the King List provides valuable historical insight into how early civilizations perceived kingship, legitimacy, and the divine origins of power. Despite the unrealistic numbers, the list remains one of the most important sources of early Mesopotamian history, blending fact, tradition, and mythology into a document that has fascinated historians for centuries. The Sumerian King List presents one of the earliest written references to a great flood, which acts as a dividing line between pre-Diluvian or before the flood and post-Diluvian or after the flood rulers. According to the text, before this catastrophic event, kings reigned for impossibly long periods, ranging from 28,800 to 43,200 years. But after the flood, reigns became much shorter and more historically verifiable. The flood is not described in detail in the King List itself, but is acknowledged as a civilization-altering event that reset kingship. The passage states, after the flood had swept over and kingship had descended from heaven, kingship was in Kish. This suggests that after the deluge, the center of power shifted to the city of Kish, which was among the earliest city-states to emerge post-flood in Mesopotamian history. The Great Flood narrative in the Sumerian King List closely parallels other ancient flood myths, particularly the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was written between 2100 and 2000 BCE. In that epic, a man named Utnapishtim is warned by the gods of an impending flood and instructed to build a massive boat, a story strikingly similar to the biblical tale of Noah's Ark, which was written much later, between 1500 and 500 BCE, depending on scholarly estimates. This suggests that Mesopotamian flood stories may have influenced later religious traditions. From a historical and geological perspective, there is evidence that a major flood event affected Mesopotamia around 2900 BCE. Excavations at Ur, Kish, Shuruppak, and other ancient Mesopotamian sites have uncovered layers of silt and flood deposits, supporting the idea that a large-scale flood occurred. While this event was likely regional rather than global, for the people of Mesopotamia whose cities were built along the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, such a disaster would have been devastating enough to be recorded in oral tradition and later written texts. The flood serves as an important narrative device in the Sumerian King List, marking a shift from legendary rulers with impossibly long lifespans to more historically verifiable kings. Whether the event was a literal historical flood or a mythological reset of kingship, its presence in the text reflects an enduring theme in ancient cultures, the idea of a divine catastrophe wiping out civilization and allowing a new order to emerge. The Sumerian King List is a mix of mythology and historical records, with some rulers confirmed through independent archaeological evidence while others remain unverified. The pre-Diluvian or pre-flood kings, who allegedly ruled for tens of thousands of years, are widely considered mythological or symbolic due to their impossibly long lifespans and lack of independent historical confirmation. However, some post-Diluvian or post-flood kings are supported by inscriptions, artifacts, and external records, proving that the list contains elements of real history. One of the first verifiable rulers from the list is Enmebara of Kish, who ruled around 2600 BCE. His name appears in inscriptions discovered in Kish, and he is also referenced in later Sumerian texts, including the Epic of Gilgamesh. Enmebara is notable for being the earliest known Mesopotamian ruler confirmed by archaeology, as fragments of vases bearing his name have been found. His son Ega of Kish is also mentioned in Gilgamesh's legends. Another figure from the list with possible historical verification is Gilgamesh of Uruk, who supposedly ruled around 2500 BCE. Though he is most famous as the central character in the Epic of Gilgamesh, some scholars believe he may have been based on a real ruler. Archaeological evidence from the 21st century BCE includes inscriptions that refer to Gilgamesh as a king of Uruk, suggesting that his legend may be rooted in actual history. Further down the list, rulers from the 3rd dynasty of Ur, which spanned from 2112 to 2004 BCE, including Shulgi of Ur, are well documented in historical records. Shulgi ruled for 48 years, from 2094 to 2047 BCE, and is mentioned in multiple royal inscriptions where he describes his conquests, infrastructure projects, and religious reforms. His well-preserved records confirm the accuracy of the later sections of the King List. Thus, while the earliest rulers in the Sumerian King List remain unverified, several later kings, particularly those who ruled after 2600 BCE, have been confirmed by archaeological discoveries. This suggests that while the King List contains mythological exaggerations, it also preserves valuable historical data about early Mesopotamian rulers. The Sumerian King List had a lasting influence on subsequent civilizations, particularly in Mesopotamia, the wider Near East, and even biblical traditions. Its structure, which blends divine kingship, exaggerated lifespans, and a chronological record of rulers, set a precedent for how ancient cultures recorded history and justified political power. Influence on Mesopotamian dynastic records. The tradition of recording and legitimizing kingship through written lists continued in later Mesopotamian civilizations, including the Akkadian Empire, the Babylonian Kingdom, and the Assyrian Empire. The Babylonians, for instance, kept their own dynastic records, such as the Babylonian King List, which followed a similar structure but focused on their rulers. These later lists sometimes included legendary or divine rulers, suggesting that the myth-history framework of the Sumerian King List remained a significant model for royal historiography. Parallels with the biblical genealogies in Genesis. Some scholars believe that the long lifespans of the pre-Diluvian Sumerian kings influenced the biblical patriarchs in Genesis, such as Methuselah, Noah, and Adam. The structure of Genesis, which includes a pre-flood era of long-lived figures followed by shorter-lived post-flood descendants, closely resembles the Sumerian King List's division between pre-Diluvian and post-Diluvian rulers. While there is no direct evidence that the biblical writers copied the King List, it is clear that Mesopotamian traditions had a significant impact on later Jewish and Near Eastern historical narratives. Concept of divine kingship. The idea that kingship descended from heaven, as stated in the Sumerian King List, was not unique to Sumer. This belief in divine or semi-divine rulers became a common theme in other ancient civilizations, including Egypt, where pharaohs were seen as gods on earth, and China, where the mandate of heaven justified rulership. This suggests that the King List may have contributed to a broader ideological framework of royal legitimacy that extended beyond Mesopotamia. Mythological and literary influence. Apart from historical records, the Sumerian King List influenced later literary and mythological traditions. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the world's earliest surviving works of literature, contains kings from the King List, such as Gilgamesh of Uruk and Enma-Baragizi of Kish, blending historical figures with mythological elements. This further illustrates how the King List was not just a record of rulers but also a foundation for storytelling, myth-making, and cultural identity. In conclusion, the Sumerian King List had a profound impact on historical recording, religious traditions, and political structures in the ancient world. Whether through royal genealogy, divine kingship, or flood mythology, its influence can be traced through multiple civilizations, from Mesopotamia to the Hebrew Bible and beyond. The Sumerian King List has been preserved primarily through multiple cuneiform inscriptions found across different sites in ancient Mesopotamia. The most complete version is the Weld-Blundell Prism, discovered in 1923 at Kish by British archaeologist Herbert Weld-Blundell. This four-sided clay prism, dating back to around 2000 BCE, contains the longest and most detailed version of the King List and is currently housed in the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, England. Other fragments of the King List have been found at sites such as Nippur, Lhasa, and Ur, each containing variations of the text. These differences suggest that the list was copied and modified over centuries, potentially to reflect changing political ideologies or dynastic claims. The durability of the cuneiform script, written on clay tablets and baked in kilns, has played a crucial role in the preservation of the text. Unlike papyrus or parchment, which are vulnerable to decay, clay tablets can survive for thousands of years if kept in dry environments. However, many copies of the King List remain fragmentary, with missing sections and damaged text due to the passage of time. Modern scholarship has further contributed to the preservation of the King List through digitalization and linguistic analysis. In recent years, institutions such as the Cuneiform Digital Library Initiative and the Electronic Text Corpus of Sumerian Literature have worked to translate, digitize, and make these texts available to scholars worldwide. This allows for more accurate reconstructions of the text and comparisons between different versions found across Mesopotamian cities. Despite these efforts, challenges remain. Some copies of the Sumerian King List are incomplete, with missing portions that make it difficult to establish a definitive chronology. Additionally, variations between versions raise questions about how much of the list was altered over time for political or religious purposes. However, thanks to continuous excavations, new fragments are still being discovered, offering the possibility of filling in these gaps. Through these combined efforts, archaeological discovery, preservation in museums, digital restoration, and scholarly research, the Sumerian King List remains one of the most well-preserved and studied ancient texts, offering a rare glimpse into how early civilizations recorded their history and legitimized kingship. The Sumerian King List remains one of the most enigmatic and controversial historical records from the ancient world. It is a text that blurs the line between mythology and history, offering a chronological list of rulers that includes both legendary figures with impossibly long reigns and historically verifiable kings. While the pre-Diluvian kings present reign lengths that seem highly exaggerated, some of the post-Diluvian kings have been confirmed through independent inscriptions, such as Enigma of Kish and Gilgamesh of Uruk. This suggests that the king list is not purely fictional, but contains a mix of historical records, political propaganda, and ancient storytelling traditions. One of the most fascinating aspects of the king list is its reference to a great flood, which closely parallels the Epic of Gilgamesh and later biblical flood narratives. Archaeological evidence, including sediment layers in Ur, Shuruppak, and Kish, suggests that a significant flooding event may have occurred around 2900 BCE, possibly inspiring these flood myths. However, whether this was a localized event or a global catastrophe remains a subject of debate. The purpose of the Sumerian King List is also debated. Some scholars believe it was used as a political tool to legitimize dynastic rule by tracing the divine origins of kingship, reinforcing the belief that power was bestowed by the gods. Others suggest that it was an attempt to organize fragmented oral traditions into a unified historical narrative, creating a sense of continuity across various city-states. Despite the preservation of the text on clay tablets and the Weld-Blundell prism, challenges remain in fully understanding its historical accuracy, linguistic variations, and missing sections. Since different versions of the King List exist, some names and reigns may have been altered or lost over time, complicating efforts to reconstruct the original text. The Sumerian King List continues to captivate historians, archaeologists, and those interested in ancient mysteries. It raises fundamental questions about the origins of civilization, the nature of kingship, and how early societies recorded and mythologized their past. Was it simply a tool for political manipulation? Or does it contain echoes of a lost history that we have yet to fully understand? With ongoing discoveries and advancements in linguistic analysis, we may one day unlock even more secrets hidden within this ancient chronicle of rulers and gods. For those who want to explore the Sumerian King List in greater depth, here are some highly recommended books that provide detailed insights into Sumerian history, mythology, and ancient texts. The first book is The Sumerians, Their History, Culture, and Character by Samuel Noah Kramer. It is a comprehensive look at Sumerian civilization, covering mythology, literature, and the significance of the Sumerian King List. The second book is The Sumerian World, edited by Harriet Crawford. This collection of essays by top scholars provides an in-depth examination of Sumerian society, kingship, and archaeology. The third is the Electronic Text Corpus of Sumerian Literature, ETCSL, by Oxford University. For those who want to go straight to the source, this digital resource provides translations of original Sumerian texts, including versions of the King List. The Sumerian King List remains one of the most fascinating documents from the ancient world, bridging the gap between history, legend, and political narrative. If you found this deep dive into the mysteries of ancient Sumer interesting, don't forget to like the video to support more research-based historical content. Subscribe to the channel for deeper dives into ancient texts, lost civilizations, and hidden history. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode about ancient mysteries. Check the description section for the recommended books, sources, and additional materials for further research. What do you think about the Sumerian King List? Do you believe it's purely a political and mythological document, or could it hint at a lost period of human history? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next deep dive into history's greatest mysteries.